Alright, good afternoon YouTube. I'm Augie F. This is the Kawasaki Z650. Had it for a week now. I'm going to be sharing my review. Welcome to the channel. Minimum vibrations, as always, from these Kawasaki's. Now then, ever since I've got back from Goa after riding the Royal Enfield twins, I've wanted to get back onto a Kawasaki because these parallel twins are the next closest competition we have to a 650 twin. Now don't get me wrong, I know I've just said that they're the closest competition, but I mean in terms of the engine type, parallel twin cylinder engines, and that's probably the last thing they have in common. After that, they're very different motorcycles. This is more of a street fighter, a naked motorcycle. Those are, well, a cruiser and a cafe racer. But we're not talking about the Royal Enfields right now, we're talking about this Z650. Anzen Kawasaki has been kind enough to give me this motorcycle and the Versus 650, which I'll be reviewing a little later, for a week. And during my time spent with the motorcycle, I've been riding to work and back and did a weekend run as well. Unfortunately, the footage from that weekend ride and most of my city riding was lost because my hard drive crashed. So thank you Seagate, you guys are brilliant. But nevertheless, I've got the bike for a short city spin and I'm going to share my 2 cents about the motorcycle. Let's start off with the first thing you'll actually notice when you sit on a motorcycle, the riding position. The rider's triangle is not very aggressive. In fact, the foot pegs are set a little further in front, and you really won't have any problems adjusting to the seating position even if you've come off something like an RC390 like I have. The curves in the tank as well allow you to kind of lock your legs and your thighs in place when riding aggressively on this motorcycle, and even otherwise as well. It's always advisable to leave the handlebars pretty loose while riding. For those of you who've been to race schools, most of the effort of gripping onto the motorcycle should be done by your legs, and this allows you to do that very well, even without any kind of traction pads on it. The seat does feel like it's on the stiffer side, but I guess you'll have to do a longer ride on this motorcycle to actually figure out whether that will be a bad thing, because some of the motorcycles that I've had a chance to ride for a longer period have had a soft seat, and that proved to be a pain in the ass on longer rides. Now, if you're considering buying this motorcycle to ride with a pillion, understand that back seat is a lot smaller than you'd expect a rear seat to be. In fact, it reminds me a lot about my R15 V2 which I had. Now, this bike wasn't meant to tour, but you could if you wanted to. Of course, you'd have to make a few adjustments here and there, but that rear seat isn't something that's going to attract the ladies, and if you've got one, it might just ruin your relationship. I'm talking about a hard rear seat, just to make things clear. I'm not talking about the Z650. I don't own one. Now let's talk about the suspension for a bit, because that's something you'll notice right away when you sit on the bike. It's plush, it's soft, but when you hit the brakes like this, the front kind of dips in pretty aggressively. One of the main issues I had with the ER6N, which was the outgoing model of this motorcycle, was the fact that the front suspension was very soft and it would dip in very aggressively. Plus, the ER6N never came with ABS, even as an option in India. It is aided by an ABS system which works very well. The brakes on this are just phenomenal. I don't think I've had a chance to ride a motorcycle with front brakes as good as this. Fortunately, I've had a chance to ride quite a few 600cc motorcycles, especially naked bikes. None of them have even come close to the braking capabilities of the Z650. You'll only get confident going fast if you know that your brakes are good enough, and with this motorcycle, those brakes inspire you to go faster. The only thing is getting a bit accustomed to the front suspension, because that kind of dipping which takes place at the front end isn't something which you get with most motorcycles. I know it sounds like what I'm saying about that front suspension is a downside, but in reality, with the kind of roads that we have here in Mumbai and in most major cities from what I hear, that front suspension being soft is a good thing, because we eat up these bumps and potholes pretty easily, like so, without any effort. Now, while the power figures on this are good, what works in its favor even more is that the motorcycle is light. In fact, it's about 17 kgs lighter than the ER6N and significantly lighter than its competition as well. And one of the main reasons for that taking place is the new frame that they've come up with and the way this motorcycle has been set up to handle. One thing you'd love about Kawasaki's is the stock setup of their suspension. While I have said a lot about the front suspension on this motorcycle, that rear suspension is really a joy to live with, because by default the settings on that are brilliant, and if you want to make some adjustments, well, the preload is adjustable. The build quality is brilliant. Oh, hold on a second. Not bad, stop. Not bad. Build quality is brilliant. There's no rattling and clicking that's audible from the motorcycle. Very smooth, very refined, and I think it's overall just a good package put together into a small frame, and we'll get into that in a second. The seat height. Now, the seat height on this motorcycle is pretty low. In fact, it's 790 mm if I'm not mistaken. And a short rider would really love riding this motorcycle. A taller rider? I'm not so sure. I'm 5'10", 5'11"-ish, and when I sit on the motorcycle, my knees are a bit cramped up because of the position of the foot pegs, but it's not something that's really uncomfortable, and it isn't by any means a deal breaker. For those of you who would be sitting on this motorcycle for a longer time, I'd recommend using something like a ride-on-air seat, and if you're a taller rider, that would pretty much take care of that slight awkwardness that exists because of the low seat height. Holy f***, what the f***? Now, the engine. The great part about this motorcycle engine is that it is tuned for low and mid-range power, and it doesn't disappoint when you pull the throttle. Yes, it would compromise on top-end speed, but in reality, a naked motorcycle, you'd be using that more in the city than on the highway. And if you're looking to tour on it, you're really not going to be using that power up top very frequently, at least not in India, considering there's animals, there's uneducated people, and the occasional dumbass driver to try and kill you. Okay, ground clearance test now. Survived. The ground clearance really isn't a lot. It's 130 millimeters, but I've not been able to scrape the bottom part of this motorcycle on any of the speed breakers which I normally scrape the bottom of my motorcycle on. And that's surprising considering the suspension in the front is as soft as I said it was. It's a good kind of surprise. Again, I've not gone jumping into speed breakers and potholes and whatnot, so it probably depends on your riding style. Heat management. Now, like you've seen for most of this vlog, I've been riding through the city in heavy traffic. Just about now is when I've got a little wind through my nuts. But apart from that, it's been stop and go traffic for most of the time. And the engine hasn't in any way thrown heat onto my legs or any part of my body. And from what I understand, this motorcycle's radiator fan pushes the air away from the rider. I think it pushes it towards the bottom if I'm not mistaken. The tyres on this really work well. The Dunlop Sportmax tyres which they've gone with kind of complement the handling capabilities of this motorcycle, and they really allow you to sometimes test your own limits, although you shouldn't be doing that in the city. I remember one of my friends who owned a Ninja 650 earlier used to swear by the Dunlop tyres, and I understand now why. Now, I like that they've given this a slipper clutch to work with as well, because it makes handling that clutch really easy. Also, they've given it adjustable levers as well, so in case you've got short or long fingers, you can adjust it based off your own preference when it comes to this motorcycle. Handling then becomes a lot easier, and when your brake pads start to wear out, you can get a little more bite for your money. Now, I've shared a lot of positives about this motorcycle. Let me be honest and share the downsides of it as well. People who buy a 5,19,000 showroom motorcycle, which is 650cc, expect it to be a little more louder than it currently is. And while if you buy a Kawasaki for the refinement, you really won't be disappointed. If you're someone who buys a big bike because it's a big bike, you might be a little disappointed because A, it's not as big in terms of the actual mass that you get with the motorcycle, and B, it doesn't sound like it's a very big motorcycle. If you're someone who wants to sneak into a street race against pulsars and win convincingly without them knowing that it's a big bike, well, then this is the bike for you. Yeah, but jokes apart, this is a more refined motorcycle, and while it might not give you the feel of a big bike, when you sit on it, when you start to ride it, you'll actually realize how much power is really on tap. And the entire combination of good tires, a great suspension, and a light chassis is a rare thing in today's motorcycle industry. Add a set of good brakes to the whole equation, and you've got a pretty good package to work with. That's what she said. Now, most people just look at the cost of buying the motorcycle and they ignore the cost of maintaining it afterwards. And if you're doing that with the Kawasaki or with any superbike, you're going to be in for a surprise. And that's where people end up selling motorcycles on OLX and whatnot. But in my reviews, I'd like to give you an understanding of how much it would take to maintain the motorcycle as well after you spend your money on buying the motorcycle. A lot of people look at Kawasaki's as expensive motorcycles to own, especially in India, because of the cost of spares and maintenance and whatnot. What I'm going to do is put a list of some of the most common parts that you need to change on your motorcycle during servicing and whatnot, and I'll let you be the judge of how expensive that is. So depending on how much you can afford, you can take a call for yourself. Also, if you look at the quality of the parts which Kawasaki offer, the parts last a lot longer than you think they would. So you wouldn't really end up spending as much as you think you would. And if you're calculating based on the way you change parts on your regular motorcycle, I'd ask you to have a second look at that, because those calculations might be a little off. What I'm also going to get from Kawasaki, and I'm going to put that on the screen right now, is the cost of servicing, the regular servicing. So you can get an understanding of how much it would then take to maintain this motorcycle over time as well. Oh, I almost forgot to talk about this, but the instrument cluster on this has been updated, and the information available on tap now is a lot more than what you had on the ER6N, and it's a lot more easily readable as well, especially while riding at night. The headlight on this motorcycle has a decent amount of throw, and it's good enough to use in the city, but if you're planning on taking it out on the highway, I'd recommend that you get some kind of auxiliary lights or an aftermarket light installed, because you might need a little more illumination to help you out. And finally, I know a lot of people don't talk about this, but I will. The mirrors on this motorcycle are placed very well, easily adjustable, and I think owing to the seating position, you're able to view quite a lot that's going on behind you. And if you ride in Mumbai, I think you need a full 360-degree perspective. This really helps. Alright, that's pretty much all I had for today's review. Thank you so much again for watching the channel. If you like these kind of reviews, give the video a thumbs up and let me know about that in the comment section. If you did not like something about the video, again, let me know about that in the comment section as well. Feedback, positive and negative, is always welcome. As always guys, at least, As always guys, at least wear your helmets while riding your motorcycles and ride safe. Sala rasta pura jungle hai. Goodbye.